Thanks very much indeed for joining us for our latest conversation, broadcast on radio and television from the Media Line studios. I'm David Harris. Today on the docket, politics in the Middle East, particularly in the Palestinian areas and Israel. Have the current leaders failed this generation, and what of the future? In order to discuss those topics, I'm delighted to welcome into the studio two guests, Professor Gabi Shefer from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and Professor Mohammed Dajani from Al-Quds University. Gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed. Let's start perhaps with you, Professor Dajani. Why is it Yasser Arafat was such a strong, dominant force in Palestinian life and Palestinian politics?
He was there the longest. He managed to survive in Palestinian and Arab and the national politics for a very long time. There were children who were born among Palestinians who never heard of any other leader. And so that's why to them he became eventually like a father figure. And there wasn't anybody else competing with him regarding number one.
Professor Shefer, the same to you from the point of view of the Israelis.
Well, in the Israeli case, you have a different situation. You have generations of leaders. It started with people, after the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. It started with Ben Gurion, and later on there were a younger generation. What we are facing now in Israel is the situation where you have the fifth generation of leaders. Most of these leaders are in their 60s, except for Shimon Peres, who is a phenomenal guy, and he has no political power anymore, no major political power anymore.
Now, in both cases, though, the leaders of today are certainly not as powerful as the old guard, Yasser Arafat, the previous generations that you were speaking of. Let's look at the Palestinian example first, and that is Mahmoud Abbas. He doesn't seem to have the same oomph, the same get up and go, and therefore perhaps the same support that his predecessor Yasser Arafat had.
He has come at difficult times. The Intifada was there before him, and so he inherited a lot of problems that he found very difficult to overcome, and the challenges that he is facing are tremendous challenges that did not really give him a chance to implement his views and his policies.
Gabi Shefer, in the Israeli case, today you have Ehud Barak, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Ehud Olmert. I get the impression that all three of them are very weak, that all three of them, or at least in two of the cases they've run for re-election, haven't made it. There isn't that strength that there used to be in the old generations.
4 networks which are making all the decisions and most of the decisions, okay? And these networks are the military network. The second network is the oligarchs, namely the rich person in Israel. The third network is the religious and ultra-religious Jews, the rabbis. And the fourth network are the bureaucrats. All these networks play major roles in determining strategies, determining policies, and implementing all these, which makes the life of these three leaders highly problematic.
I think it's probably fair to say that certainly in the case of the most recent leaders, Ariel Sharon and Yasser Arafat, that perhaps even if they were hated by some of their own people, they still had charisma, they had a spark, they had a je ne sais quoi that drew you to those people. Is that something that is key, that is vital to be a successful leader?
What we need is visionary, more than charismatic leaders, visionary leaders who could look in the future and try to pull our people out of the past and present to the future. Then we will remain in this crisis that we are facing, unfortunately.
I think that ideology is very important in making certain people as leaders, as strong leaders. Unfortunately, these three leaders, Barak, Netanyahu, and Olmert, have lost all significant ideology. They are pragmatists. They are fighting, to survive, They are fighting for their parties, but ideology is almost dead, and I think that this is a very important factor which creates some problems for their leadership.
10, 15, 20 years down the line, is it going to be the same story, or are we going to see teachers and people who clean the roads and farmers and the people that traditionally society does not think of as possible leaders? Could they ever take the bull by the horns and become the leaders of these two peoples?
I certainly believe it will be. I certainly believe that the social barriers that did not allow others to emerge before is crumbling down, and there are more now. People are relating to people whom they identify with them, and in the future leaders who will emerge will be from the masses, from just ordinary people.
It might change, but as far as I can see, this pattern that I mentioned at the beginning, one generation is developing and promoting, the second generation will continue in the near future.
Professor Gabi Sheffer, I want to thank you very much indeed for participating. Professor Mohammed Ajani, thank you very much indeed. And to you at home for joining us for this conversation. Please do look out for the next of our conversations from here at the Media Line.